when you're doing the pollination work is the first few days of hot weather for spring, which means all the reptiles are coming out, and so you have the occasional heart starter with tiger snakes, which are one of the world's most sort of few venomous snakes, and which are also renowned for being quite an aggressive thing. And I've almost stood on a pair of copulating tiger snakes about an hour and a half from the nearest hospital. That was a bit of a
wow.
But one of the good things about working in places like Western Australia is that you can camp kind of freely, and you just chuck your well, we all use swags, which is like a mattress with a canvas sack kind of thing, and go have a campfire, and you just jump in the car, and off you go, and it's sort of hassle-free camping, and lots of really beautiful national parks to do it in. And I was privileged enough that these Dracula occur over about a north-south. It's about 700 kilometres, and a similar distance east-west. So the work sort of takes you right out to the edge of the arid zone, right down to the real sort of wet forests in the southwest, and sort of spent 3 months of the year on the road, pretty much just living out of the car, camping and doing field work. So, for a person who really loves their field biology, it was a pretty amazing experience from that point of view.
One of the things that has been a message to me about working in this field is more of a sociological message. I think that there were early reports in the around 1980 of communication between trees, and these got labeled as talking trees. The experiments had problems, as do all experiments, and I think that the field as a whole evaluated these experiments and decided that they'd been debunked, and therefore that the phenomenon of volatile communication between plants wasn't occurring. And that made acceptance of this work far more difficult. It was as if we had already decided that we'd considered this phenomenon, couldn't find evidence for it, debunked it, and it didn't occur. And so gaining acceptance of this work has been a lot more difficult based on this sort of sociological history. And that has been pretty challenging working in this field.
Well, we thought we'd do a third field site, my field assistant and I. And we went out and we started to work on it, but we ended up actually there were a lot of rattlesnakes, surprisingly. Despite it being a fairly rare species, we heard rattlesnakes all around us. And so we had, coming from a country which has no snakes, it was a little bit terrifying. My field assistant refused to work there. We didn't use that side, so we would have had N equals, we had 3 sides, but we've only got 2.
Well, this isn't really about research, but while working on this project, I lived in the small town of Fairplay, Colorado. This is a very unique and interesting place. It's a town that's really rich in mining history, and they celebrate that history every summer with their Burro Days Festival. And for a few summers, my field assistants and I got a chance to race llamas on a 5K run through town. And, if you've ever raced a llama, you know that running with a llama is not an easy experience. They really have minds of their own, and they might stop in the middle of the road. They might go the wrong way.
Right.
And it's really an interesting experience, and the town of Fairplay is just a really interesting and fun place to work. So I would highly recommend that people visit.
I don't know if we have any particularly exciting stories, since this is an essay review. We were mainly sitting in front of our computers.
Yeah.
One of the studies we reviewed was our own study from Oregon, and we were working in the Klamath-Siskiyou Mountains. And that's the study that actually showed at least as great a response on special soils as on normal soils. Mm-hmm. And that was a really exciting study because we were using a historical data set collected by Robert Whitaker in the 1950s, and then going back and resampling those sites. And so that was a really fun exercise to try to figure out where Whitaker had went and sample the same locations. And a lot of things have changed since that time. A lot of things haven't, but doing things like scrambling up road cuts that didn't used to be there to try to find particular locations. And sliding down hillsides and things that, again, were not there in Whitaker's time.
I've been trying to think of a good story, and I actually, other than an encounter with a crocodile that happened while working on this project, I don't know, it's tough for me to think of one. I do want to share, though, if I may, a neat story relating to Psychotria is, so there are many species in the genus. There are over 2,000 worldwide, but the two anyone would have heard of include one known as the hot lips. This is Psychotria popigiana, and it has an inflorescence, a cluster of small flowers that are surrounded by two large bracts that have evolved to as a display for pollinators, and so they've converged on the form of a flower petal. So they really look like two big red lips. And so the plant is iconic for looking like a pair of lips. Another one of the species that is really iconic is Psychotria viridis, which is well known for its use in the hallucinogenic brew known as ayahuasca in the Western Amazon. So this is really interesting because it contains a drug known as dimethyltryptamine, or DMT, and that drug is a hallucinogenic drug, but it's easily broken down by monoamine oxidases. And so if one were just to consume Psychotria viridis alone, the DMT compound would be broken down and it would never get absorbed into the brain and never into the bloodstream and never reach the brain. So what the indigenous people in the Western Amazon do is they make a brew in which they mix the roots of Banisteriopsis caapi, a malpig vine, with the leaves of Psychotria viridis. And the roots of this Banisteriopsis vine contain a monoamine oxidase inhibitor that prevents those enzymes from breaking down the DMT and so allow it to be fully absorbed. And so I find it really fascinating that they managed to, through trial and error, I presume, figure out this combination. But it's used as in their religious rituals as a hallucinogenic experience.
I didn't spend time in the field, but I spent, as I said, a lot of time in herbaria, and for me it was quite a privilege to work in some of these very old institutes like Kew Botanical Gardens and Coimbra Herbarium, and a highlight was the Natural History Museum in London, mainly because these are institutes where some of the oldest, or the biologists that have been seminal in our modern field of biology have worked. And while I was working at the Natural History Museum in London, I was sitting in the herbarium, which is in the new part of the museum called the Cocoon. And part of the novelty of the Cocoon is that you can actually see scientists at work. So I was part of the live exhibitions at the Natural History Museum for a few days. The only problem with that was that a lot of the school children that came through would knock on the windows to see me react. So I felt a bit like a monkey in a zoo at times. Yeah.
I don't have any interesting stories, little things like my field worker sitting there eating lunch and a sloth falling out of a tree and almost landing. You see ocelots occasionally, which is jaw-dropping. Just working in these forests is so remarkable that every day you seem to see something where you say, wow, unbelievable, And so interesting stories that jump out at me, but it's this is a forest with a lot of different animals, and there's almost no poaching there. And so you see a lot of animals, there's a lot of interactions going on in this site. So it's a cool place to work. But, you know, I didn't see the, you know, the jaguar chasing the deer or anything like that. So